Bathory is famed as the Blood Countess, an Eastern European aristocrat who tortured and murdered over 600 girls. She remains one of Europe's most infamous criminals. The Countess was born in 1560 in Transylvania and died in 1614. Elizabeth Bathory was born to Baron George Bathory and Baroness Anna Bathory, one of the oldest and wealthiest families in Transylvania. She had powerful connections as her family had dominated Transylvania and her uncle had ruled Poland. Her brother Stefan, on the other hand, was less respectable, as he was a drunkard and a lecher. Bathory's aunt, a distinguished lady at the court, was reputed to be a witch, and her uncle was an alchemist and devil worshipper. And to make matters worse, her nurse from childhood was arrested in the practice of black magic. Unusual for one of her social status, she was a very fit and active child. It is said that at the age of 4 or 5, she suffered from violent seizures, which may have been caused from epilepsy or some other neurological disorder. She was also promiscuous. She fell pregnant to a peasant lover at the age of 14 and gave birth to a young daughter who she named Anastasia. However, Anastasia was given away because Elizabeth was ashamed about having a daughter with a peasant. At the age of 15, she married Count Fenric Nadesty, a great warrior who was often away from home. For the first 10 years of their marriage, Elizabeth bore no children. Then around 1585, Elizabeth gave birth to her first child, a girl who she called Anna. Over the next 9 years, she gave birth to 2 more daughters, Ursula and Katrina, and her first son, Paul. In letters to her family members, she seemed to be a loving wife and caring mother to her 4 children. In 1604, Elizabeth's husband died of an infected wound, which resulted in the Countess becoming one of the richest landowners of central Romania. Her first act was to banish her mother-in-law from the country, and she took her grandchildren with her. One day, a servant girl accidentally pulled her hair while combing it. Elizabeth slapped the girl's hand so hard she drew blood. The girl's blood fell into Elizabeth's hand, and she immediately thought that her skin took on the freshness of her young maid. She believed that she had found the secret of eternal youth. Elizabeth had her servant strip the maid and then cut her and drain her blood into a huge vat. Elizabeth bathed in it to beautify her entire body. This began the period of time that had Elizabeth prowl around the countryside looking for young peasant girls who she could take and drain of blood. When back in the castle, each batch of young girls would be hung, alive and naked, upside down by chains wrapped around their ankles. Their throats would be slit and all of their blood drained for Elizabeth's bath. In 1609, Elizabeth established an academy in the castle, offering to take 25 girls at a time from proper families, and to correctly finish their educations. Well, indeed, their educations were finished. Elizabeth Bathory was accused in the testimonies gathered by the Count Palatine of killing between a couple of dozen and over 600 young women. These were almost all of noble birth and had been sent to the court for learning and advancement. Some of the more reputable tortures include sticking pins into the girls, tearing at their flesh with heated tongs, dousing and submerging them in freezing water, and beating them, often on the soles of their feet. A few of the testimonies claim Elizabeth ate the girls' flesh. The alleged crimes were claimed to have taken place at Elizabeth's estate across the region, and sometimes on the journey between them. Corpses were supposed to have been hidden in a variety of places, sometimes getting dug up by nosy dogs. but the most common method of disposal was to have bodies secretly buried in churchyards at night. After several years of hunting innocent young women, Elizabeth Bathory was finally captured when rumors spread all over Hungary about her activities. Buried all over the castle grounds and even hidden inside the castle itself, hundreds of corpses and skeletons, all bearing horrific injuries. Soldiers recalled corpses with no eyes, no arms or legs. Clothing and personal effects of the kidnapped girls were also found, and several graves were found, dug hastily around the castle grounds. Elizabeth was put on house arrest straight away, and on the 2nd of January 1611, she was put on trial. Elizabeth, however, did not attend her trials due to her nobility. The testimonies of the 4 accomplices placed the body count between 30 and 60, but a 5th witness revealed the single most shocking piece of evidence in the trial: a list or register in the Countess's chest of drawers, which put the number of girls killed at 650, and that was in her ladyship's own handwriting. After 2 trials, the King of Hungary found her guilty, but because of her nobility, she was not sentenced to death, but instead imprisoned in a room of her castle with only a small hole to fit food and water through. Her accomplices were, however, all sentenced to death for their crimes. He found her lying on the ground of her cell, dead at the age of 54. Elizabeth did not ever utter even a single word of regret or remorse. Being responsible for the murder and torture of over 600 young girls is without a doubt a guilty act, and little Elizabeth also had a very guilty mind. So not only was actus reus involved, mens rea was also involved, more specifically, intention. However, when it comes to meeting the demographic, Countess Elizabeth was not your typical criminal. The peak period of criminal engagement appears to be between the ages of 15 and 18, and our Countess didn't start her criminal activity until later in life. Poverty has been associated with criminal behavior, but our Countess came from a family of nobility. It appears that Countess Elizabeth only associated with pretty good people, aside from her accomplices, that is. Males have been more likely to commit crime than females, yet here we are, dealing with the Countess. Bathory definitely was a repeat offender, however she only got sentenced once, so recidivism doesn't exactly apply to her. When it comes to picking out a criminology theory, I would have to go with biological, psychobiological, and classical. The reason I'm saying biological theory is because there has to be something in her genetics. If there was something very wrong with her brother, and her auntie and her uncle, it doesn't really specify her parents exactly, but it definitely runs in the family. Same goes with psychobiological. When it talks about her experiencing seizures at a very young age, there has to be something in the brain there. And also free will. It's hard to classify Countess Bathory as either a psychopath or a sociopath because she displays characteristics of both. Signs that she was a psychopath include being very charming, unable to empathize. She was very temperamental, as you can see from her childhood, having seizures at a very young age, which could also be related to neurological. She attacked provocatively and was very, very, very cruel and violent. A sign that shows that she could have been a sociopath were her very well laid out plans. Creating a school was very, very clever and obviously took a lot of planning. Also, as previously mentioned, she wrote letters to her family members in which she came across as a very loving mother. So this gives her an outward appearance of trustworthiness and sincerity, which is a sign of a sociopath. But in the end, I'd have to classify Countess Elizabeth Bathory as a psychopath, because how impulsive and violent she was towards the girls was just unreal. These crimes crimes were absolutely preventable. There was no reason for Countess Elizabeth to be bathing in young girls' blood. There have got to be better ways to take care of your skin.